The fluorescent lights of Boston Children's Hospital cast harsh shadows across Elizabeth Bennet's face as she slumped against the cold corridor wall. Her fingers trembled as she clutched the medical report, the words blurring through her tears. Congenital heart defect. Immediate surgery required. Estimated cost, $375,000. The number seemed to mock her, each digit a reminder of her inadequacy as a mother. Her daughter Lily, just 8 years old, lay sleeping in the room behind her, blissfully unaware of the storm raging in her mother's heart. Elizabeth's mind raced through her assets, her modest librarian salary, the small savings account she'd carefully built over the years, the college fund she'd started when Lily was born. Even if she liquidated everything, it wouldn't come close to covering half the cost. She pressed her palm against her mouth, trying to muffle the sob that threatened to escape. The pristine hospital corridor stretched endlessly before her, its sterile emptiness a stark contrast to the chaos in her mind. 3 years had passed since she'd lost David in the car accident, and she'd somehow managed to keep their world turning. But this felt like the universe's cruelest joke. From the other end of the corridor, Dr. William Ashford observed, the scene with an increasingly uncomfortable tightness in his chest. He'd intended to make his usual rounds, checking on post-op patients before heading home for the night. Instead, he found himself frozen, watching as this woman's world seemingly collapsed around her. William had perfected the art of emotional distance over the years. After losing Catherine and their daughter Rebecca in a house fire 5 years ago, he'd rebuilt himself into the perfect surgeon, precise, detached, focused. His colleagues called him the Iceman behind his back, but he considered it a compliment. Emotional detachment meant survival. Yet something about this woman's quiet desperation pierced through his carefully constructed walls. Perhaps it was the way she tried to maintain composure even as her shoulders shook with silent sobs. Or maybe it was the familiar look of someone facing an impossible loss. Before he could stop himself, his feet carried him toward her. "Are you all right?" The question felt inadequate the moment it left his lips. Elizabeth startled, quickly wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her worn sweater. "I'm fine," she managed, attempting to straighten her posture. "Just taking a moment." William's eyes fell to the crumpled papers in her hand, recognizing the hospital's billing estimate format. "I'm Dr. Ashford," he said, his voice softer than usual. "I couldn't help but notice you seemed distressed. Perhaps I could help." Something in his tone, professional yet tinged with genuine concern, broke through Elizabeth's resolve. "Unless you can miracle up $375,000, I don't think anyone can help." She let out a bitter laugh that sounded more like a choke. "I'm sorry, that was rude. She gestured helplessly toward Lily's room. "My daughter needs heart surgery and I can't give her what she needs." William glanced through the room's window, where a small figure lay sleeping, her dark curls spread across the white hospital pillow. The sight stirred something in him he thought he'd buried years ago. Along with a tiny pink bicycle and a collection of stuffed animals he still couldn't bring himself to donate. "Tell me about her," he found himself saying, leaning against the wall beside Elizabeth. "Lily? She's everything." Elizabeth's voice softened with love despite her distress. "She's 8, brilliant at math, terrible at keeping her room clean, and has this laugh that could light up the darkest room. She wants to be a veterinarian because she can't bear the thought of any animal being sick or hurt." Fresh tears welled in her eyes. "And now she's the one who's sick and I can't do anything about it." William felt his carefully constructed professional distance crumbling. He thought of the board meeting scheduled for next week, where his future as chief of cardiology would be discussed. The whispers about his emotional stability, his inability to connect with patients and their families, his rigid isolation that made others uncomfortable. His sister Victoria's constant warnings about the board's growing concerns. An idea formed in his mind. Ridiculous, impossible, yet somehow compelling. "What if," he began slowly, "I told you there might be a way to help your daughter?" Elizabeth's head snapped up, hope and suspicion warring in her eyes. What do you mean? I'm one of the top cardiothoracic surgeons in the country, he stated, not as a boast but as a simple fact. I could perform your daughter's surgery, cover all the costs. But why would you? Elizabeth's voice trembled with disbelief. You don't even know us. William straightened, adjusting his tie in a nervous gesture he thought he'd abandoned years ago. Because I need something too. He paused, wondering if he'd lost his mind. I need a fiancé. Elizabeth blinked, certain she'd misheard. Excuse me? A year, he continued, his words coming faster now. Pretend to be my fiancé for 1 year. Attend hospital functions, family events. Be seen together in public. In return, I'll make sure your daughter gets the best medical care, available, all expenses covered. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as silence stretched between them. Elizabeth stared at him, trying to process what she was hearing. You're serious? Completely. William met her gaze steadily. The board of directors is concerned about my personal development. They believe my lack of connection, of family life, makes me unsuitable for advancement. With you by my side, those concerns would be addressed. Your daughter gets the care she needs. We both get what we want. Elizabeth looked back at Lily's room, where her daughter slept peacefully, unaware that her fate hung in the balance of this bizarre conversation. This is crazy, she whispered. Perhaps, William agreed, but sometimes crazy is all we have left. Through the window, the monitors beeped steadily, marking each precious beat of Lily's heart. Elizabeth thought of all the bedtime stories she'd read to her daughter, tales of fairy godmothers and magical solutions to impossible problems. None of them had prepared her for this moment. 1 year? She asked finally, her voice barely audible. William nodded. 1 year. Then you and Lily will be free to go with her health restored and your future secure. Elizabeth closed her eyes, drawing a deep breath. When she opened them again, there was a new resolve in her gaze. I'll do it. For Lily, I'll do anything. As they stood there in the hushed hospital corridor, neither of them could have known that this desperate bargain would change their lives in ways neither could imagine. That sometimes the most unlikely deals of necessity could open doors to healing that both their hearts desperately needed. William extended his hand and Elizabeth took it. Their handshake was firm, businesslike, yet something electric passed between them, a current of possibility neither was ready to acknowledge. We have a deal, Miss Bennet, William said softly. Yes, Elizabeth replied, her hand still in his. We have a deal, Dr. Ashford. And in that moment, as the night settled deeper over Boston, two broken people set in motion a story that would prove far more complex than either could have anticipated. Sometimes the greatest love stories begin not with a kiss, but with a contract, and hearts have a way of ignoring the fine print. The morning sun filtered through the expansive windows of William Ashford's Beacon Hill townhouse, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors. Elizabeth stood in the center of what would be her new bedroom, a spacious suite larger than her entire apartment, clutching a small duffel bag of belongings. The reality of their arrangement was finally sinking in. The housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, comes 3 times a week, William explained, his voice maintaining its professional distance. She's been briefed on our situation. Discretion is her specialty. He paused, hands tucked into his pockets. Your daughter's room is across the hall. I had it prepared according to the preferences you mentioned. Elizabeth nodded, unable to find words. Just 48 hours had passed since their desperate agreement in the hospital corridor, and everything had moved at a dizzying pace. Lily's pre-op tests were scheduled, papers were signed, and now here they were, moving into this stranger's immaculate home. I've prepared a schedule of upcoming events, William continued, pulling out his phone. The hospital's annual fundraising gala is in 3 weeks. It would be an appropriate venue to announce our engagement. Before that, we should be seen together at a few casual locations to establish a believable timeline. A believable timeline, Elizabeth repeated softly, testing the words. How did we meet? People will ask. William's expression shifted slightly. Was that uncertainty she glimpsed? I thought we could stay close to the truth. We met at the hospital, though perhaps we should say it was at a fundraising event rather than... He trailed off, not wanting to remind her of that moment of desperation. Rather than me crying in a hallway, Elizabeth supplied, managing a small smile. Yes, that might be better for your image. A knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Chen, a elegant woman in her 60s, stood in the doorway. Miss Lily is asking for her mother, she announced, her eyes kind but observant. Elizabeth immediately moved toward the door, but William's voice stopped her. Elizabeth? We should discuss how to handle this with Lily. She's young, impressionable. This situation could be confusing for her. The weight of their deception suddenly felt heavier. Elizabeth turned back to face him. What do you suggest? She's too young to understand this arrangement, but old enough to ask questions. William ran a hand through his dark hair, a rare gesture of uncertainty. Perhaps we tell her a simplified version, that we're friends who care about each other, and we're seeing if we might become more. It's not entirely untrue. We are trying to build something here, even if it's just for appearance. The pragmatic logic in his words struck Elizabeth, as both comforting and somehow sad. Okay, she agreed. But William, she's been through a lot. Lost her father, now this heart condition, she might get attached. I understand, he replied, but his tone suggested he didn't, not really. How could he? This was business for him, a solution to his professional problems. We'll be careful with her feelings. Elizabeth found Lily in her new room, surrounded by unpacked boxes. The girl's face lit up at the sight of her mother, then filled with wonder as she looked around the space. Mom, this room is bigger than our whole apartment, and look at the window seat. I can read there and watch the people in the park. Seeing her daughter's excitement, Elizabeth felt a mixture of gratitude and unease. This beautiful house, the life-saving surgery, the chance for Lily to have everything she deserved, it all came at the price of an elaborate lie. Do you like it here, sweetheart? Elizabeth asked, sitting beside her daughter on the window seat. Lily nodded enthusiastically, then her expression grew serious. Is Dr. Ashford going to be my new dad? The question hit Elizabeth like a physical blow. Honey, it's complicated. William and I are getting to know each other. We care about each other, but we're taking things slowly. Is that okay with you? Lily seemed to consider this, her small fingers tracing patterns on the window glass. He looks sad sometimes, like you used to look after Daddy died. Maybe we can help him not be sad anymore. Elizabeth's throat tightened. Leave it to her, daughter, to see straight through to the heart of things. Maybe, she whispered. But remember, honey, we have to give people time to feel what they feel. Later that evening, after Lily was asleep, Elizabeth found herself wandering into the kitchen for a glass of water. She was surprised to find William there, still in his work clothes, staring into a cup of what smelled like chamomile tea. Trouble sleeping? She asked, keeping her voice low. He looked up, and for a moment his carefully maintained facade slipped. I haven't had a family in this house since... He stopped, took a breath. It's louder now. Different. Elizabeth filled her glass, understanding more than she wanted to about the ghosts that seemed to linger in these elegant rooms. We can be quieter. No, he said quickly. That's not what I meant. It's nice. Different, but nice. He stood, straightening his shoulders. I had my assistant draft a press release about our engagement. Would you like to review it? And, just like that, the walls were back up. Elizabeth nodded, accepting the shift back to business. Of course. Will your family be at the gala? My sister Victoria will be. She's intense, very protective, since Catherine and Rebecca. He paused, then added, she'll have questions. I'll be ready, Elizabeth assured him, though she wasn't sure how anyone could be ready for this level of deception. William moved to leave the kitchen, then stopped. Elizabeth, thank you for doing this. I know it's not ideal." She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw beneath the polished exterior to the man who was as lost as she was, just in a different way. "We're helping each other," she said simply. "That's what matters." As she lay in bed that night, in a room that felt too large and too empty, Elizabeth thought about the web of pretense they were weaving. One wrong move, one slip of the mask, and it could all unravel. But when she thought of Lily's upcoming surgery, of the hope in her daughter's eyes when she looked at her new room, she knew she would play her part perfectly, even if it meant ignoring the way her heart had stuttered when William's mask had slipped in the kitchen, showing her a glimpse of the man beneath the carefully constructed facade, even if it meant pretending she didn't notice how his eyes lingered on her when he thought she wasn't looking. After all, this was just business. Just a contract. Just 1 year of pretense to give her daughter a chance at life. But as sleep finally claimed her, Elizabeth couldn't help but wonder. In a house full of ghosts and secrets, how long could they maintain this delicate dance of deception before something real and dangerous slipped through the cracks they were trying so hard to hide? "You'll need to relax your shoulders," William murmured, his hand resting lightly on Elizabeth's lower back as they approached the entrance of La Voile, one of Boston's most prestigious French restaurants. "You look like you're walking into surgery rather than dinner." Elizabeth forced her shoulders down, trying to emanate the confidence she didn't feel. The black cocktail dress William's personal shopper had selected felt foreign on her skin, a costume for a role she wasn't sure she could play. "Maybe because the stakes feel just as high," she whispered back through her fixed smile. Tonight marked their first public appearance as a couple. The restaurant buzzed with Boston's medical elite. Department heads, board members, and their spouses gathered for what William had casually mentioned was a regular Thursday dinner tradition. Dr. Ashford, a tall woman with perfectly coiffed, silver hair, approached them, her smile razor-sharp. "We missed you last week. And who is this lovely young woman?" William's hand pressed slightly firmer against Elizabeth's back. "Dr. Montgomery, allow me to introduce Elizabeth Bennet, my fiancée." The word fiancé hung in the air between them, and Elizabeth felt her heart skip. They'd rehearsed this moment, but hearing it aloud in public made it suddenly, startlingly, real. "Fiancé?" Dr. Montgomery's perfectly shaped eyebrows arched high. "William Ashford, you've been holding out on us. How absolutely wonderful. You must tell us everything. How did you meet?" Elizabeth felt William tense beside her, imperceptible to anyone who wasn't standing as close as she was. This was her cue, the story they'd carefully crafted. "Actually, Elizabeth charmed me at last month's pediatric wing fundraiser," William interrupted smoothly, his voice warming with an affection that sounded remarkably genuine. "She was advocating for expanded children's literacy programs in the hospital, and I found myself completely captivated by her passion for helping others." Elizabeth glanced up at him, momentarily startled by this deviation from their planned story. His eyes met hers, and something in them made her breath catch, a softness she hadn't seen before. "It was William's dedication to his patients that drew me in," she found herself saying, the words flowing naturally. "The way he lights up when talking about the lives he's helped save. It's impossible not to fall a little bit in love with that kind of compassion." Dr. Montgomery clasped her hands together in delight. "Oh, this is perfect, William. The board will be thrilled. We've all been so worried about you, especially after, well," she waved her hand dismissively. "This is exactly what everyone has been hoping for." As they were led to their table, Elizabeth noticed the ripple effect their presence was having across the restaurant. Whispers followed them. Heads turned and phones discreetly emerged to capture what would undoubtedly become tomorrow's hospital gossip. "You changed our story," Elizabeth said quietly once they were seated, her menu providing a shield for conversation. William adjusted his tie, a gesture she was beginning to recognize as a sign of discomfort. The original version felt insufficient. This one gives them what they want to see: romance, connection, purpose. Dr. Montgomery will spread it through the hospital faster than any press release could, You're good at this, Elizabeth observed, studying him over the rim of her water glass. The performance, I mean. Something flickered in his eyes. Years of practice in the operating room, projecting calm even when everything is chaos. He paused, then added more softly, though tonight not all of it feels like a performance. Before Elizabeth could process that statement, a familiar voice cut through the restaurant's ambient noise. William? Oh my God, it is you! Elizabeth turned to see a striking woman in her mid-30s approaching their table, her designer dress and perfectly styled dark hair marking her as someone who belonged in this world far more than Elizabeth. Teresa Victoria. William stood, his posture stiffening slightly. I didn't expect to see you here tonight. Clearly, his sister's sharp eyes fixed on Elizabeth. Since you haven't bothered to tell me about your guest. William's jaw tightened. Victoria, this is Elizabeth Bennett, my fiancée. Elizabeth, my sister. Victoria Ashford Pierce. Victoria's perfectly painted lips parted in shock. Your what? Fiancé? William repeated firmly, his hand finding Elizabeth's shoulder. We were planning to tell you at the gala, but since you're here, how long? Victoria demanded, sliding uninvited into their booth. How long has this been going on? Elizabeth felt the weight of Victoria's scrutiny like a physical thing. This was the moment they'd prepared for, the first real test of their story. We've been seeing each other for 2 months, Elizabeth said, channeling every ounce of sincerity she possessed. The engagement is recent, but when you know, you know. She reached for William's hand on the table, lacing their fingers together. His thumb brushed across her knuckles, a gesture so natural it made her heart stutter. Victoria's eyes narrowed. 2 months? William, that's insane. After everything with Catherine, how can you… Victoria. William's voice carried a warning edge. Not here. Fine. Victoria straightened, smoothing her dress. But we're having dinner tomorrow. All of us. I want to get to know my future sister-in-law properly. Her tone suggested an interrogation rather than a friendly family meal. After Victoria left, a heavy silence fell over their table. Elizabeth's hand was still in William's, neither of them quite ready to break the connection that had felt like their only anchor during the confrontation. I'm sorry about her, William finally said, reluctantly withdrawing his hand. Victoria has been protective since I lost Catherine and Rebecca. She won't make this easy. Elizabeth thought of Lily, of how her daughter's face lit up every morning when she discovered new details about their temporary home, of how, just yesterday, she'd caught William showing Lily his collection of medical journals, patiently explaining the basics of heart anatomy to her fascinated 8-year-old. We'll handle it, she assured him. We're in this together, remember? William's eyes met hers across the table, and for a moment, the rest of the restaurant seemed to fade away. Together, he repeated softly, like he was testing the words weight on his tongue. The waiter arrived with their wine, breaking the moment. As Elizabeth lifted her glass, she caught their reflection in the restaurant's dark windows. A striking couple, perfectly matched in their evening wear, looking, for all the world, like two people in love. But it was the things the reflection couldn't show that troubled her. The way her pulse quickened when William touched her, how natural it had felt to defend their relationship to Victoria, the dangerous way her heart was beginning to blur the lines between pretense and reality. As she took a sip of wine, Elizabeth wondered if maybe they weren't the only ones in the restaurant playing a role tonight. Maybe everyone here was performing some version of themselves, showing the world what it expected to see while hiding their true feelings behind careful smiles and practiced gestures. The only difference was, she and William had an expiration date on their performance. 1 year. She had to remember that. Even if remembering was starting to feel more and more like trying to hold on to smoke. Victoria Ashford Pierce's townhouse in Back Bay made William's home look modest by comparison. Elizabeth stood in the marble-floored entryway, grateful that William had insisted on having his personal shopper select another outfit for her. The cream silk blouse and tailored black pants helped her feel less out of place among the obvious wealth surrounding her. Mrs. Chen agreed to stay late with Lily, William murmured as they waited for Victoria's housekeeper to announce them. Though I noticed our daughter seemed more interested in the medical textbooks I left in the library than getting ready for bed. Our daughter. The words hit Elizabeth with unexpected force. When had he started referring to Lily that way? More importantly, why did it make her heart feel like it was trying to escape her chest? Before she could process this, Victoria appeared at the top of the curved staircase. "Right on time," she called down, her voice carrying that particular tone of Boston Brahmin authority. "Come up to the sitting room. Drinks are waiting." William's hand found its usual place on Elizabeth's lower back as they climbed the stairs. The gesture had become so natural over the past week that Elizabeth barely noticed anymore, until Victoria's sharp eyes zeroed in on the point of contact. The sitting room was a study in elegant restraint, all cream and gold with touches of deep blue. Family photos lined the walls, generations of Ashfords staring down at them with identical patrician features. Elizabeth's gaze caught on one particular image, a younger William, his arm around a beautiful blonde woman who held a small, dark-haired girl, Catherine and Rebecca. Their eyes seemed to follow her as she sat down. "So," Victoria began, handing them each a crystal glass of wine, "tell me everything. How exactly does a hospital librarian capture my brother's attention so completely that he proposes after only 2 months?" William tensed beside Elizabeth. "Victoria." "No, it's all right," Elizabeth interrupted, meeting Victoria's challenging stare. "I understand your concern. If I had a brother who'd been through what William has, I'd be protective too." She took a deliberate sip of wine, gathering her thoughts. "The truth is, I wasn't trying to capture anyone's attention. I was focused on my work, on raising my daughter. William and we recognize something in each other. A shared understanding of loss, perhaps. Or maybe just the realization that sometimes life gives you a second chance when you least expect it." Victoria's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose. "And your daughter, Lily, isn't it? How does she feel about all this?" "She adores William," Elizabeth said truthfully, allowing real warmth to color her voice. "Yesterday I found them in the library. William was teaching her about the circulatory system using his old medical school models. She was fascinated." Something flickered in Victoria's expression. "Medical models?" She turned to William. "You got those out? You haven't touched them since Rebecca." William finished quietly. "Yes, I know." An uncomfortable silence fell. Elizabeth could feel the weight of unspoken words, of grief still raw despite the years. "Dinner is served, Ms. Ashford Pierce," the housekeeper announced, from the doorway providing a welcome interruption. The dining room was as imposing as the rest of the house, dominated by a massive mahogany table that could easily seat 20. Victoria directed them to one end where 3 place settings awaited. "I hope you like duck, Elizabeth," Victoria said as the first course was served. "It's William's favorite, though I suppose you'd know that by now." Elizabeth's mind raced. In all their preparation, they'd never discussed favorite foods. "Actually," she began, ready to admit ignorance. "Elizabeth prefers fish," William cut in smoothly. "But she's too polite to mention it." Elizabeth stared at him, wondering how he knew that. She'd only mentioned it once in passing during a quiet breakfast 3 days ago. "How considerate of you to notice, brother." Victoria's tone was honeyed poison. "You've changed so much recently. Getting out medical models, noticing food preferences. One might almost think you were becoming your old self again." "People change, Victoria." William's voice was tight. "Isn't that what you've been pushing for all these years? Change is one thing, this..." Victoria gestured between them with her wine glass. "This is something else entirely. 2 months ago, you wouldn't even consider dating. Now you're engaged, living together, playing happy family with her daughter? That's enough." William's hand slammed down on the table, making the crystal shake. "I understand your concerns, but I won't sit here and listen to you imply..." "William." Elizabeth laid her hand over his clenched fist. To her surprise, he immediately stilled under her touch. "Victoria's asking valid questions. The same questions anyone who loves you would ask. She turned to Victoria. Yes, this happened quickly. Yes, it's unconventional. But life rarely follows the patterns we expect, does it? Sometimes the heart knows what it needs before the mind can catch up. Victoria studied her for a long moment. You truly care for him, don't you? Yes, Elizabeth answered without hesitation, surprising herself with how true it felt. I do. The rest of dinner passed in a kind of armed truce. Victoria asked about Lily's interests, about Elizabeth's work at the hospital library, about their plans for the upcoming gala. Elizabeth answered everything honestly where she could, weaving their practice story where she couldn't. It wasn't until they were leaving that Victoria pulled Elizabeth aside while William retrieved their coats. My brother, she said quietly. He's been through more than you know. If this is some kind of game. It's not, Elizabeth interrupted, injecting every ounce of sincerity she possessed into her voice. I would never hurt him. Victoria's eyes softened slightly. No, I don't think you would. Not intentionally, anyway. She glanced toward the foyer where William waited. Just be careful with him, and with yourself. Sometimes the heart leads us places we never meant to go. The drive home was quiet, both of them processing the evening. It wasn't until they were parking in front of William's townhouse that he spoke. You were remarkable tonight, he said softly. The way you handled Victoria. I've never seen anyone manage her quite like that. Elizabeth smiled faintly. I just told the truth where I could. She paused, then added, You surprised me too, noticing my preference for fish the way you've been with Lily. William's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I find myself noticing a lot of things lately that I didn't expect to notice. The weight of unspoken words filled the car. Elizabeth's heart thundered in her chest as she remembered Victoria's parting warning about hearts leading where they shouldn't go. We should check on Lily, she said finally, breaking the moment. Yes, William agreed, though neither of them moved. Elizabeth? Yes? Thank you. For tonight. For all of it. In the darkness of the car, with the soft glow of streetlights painting shadows across his face, he looked younger somehow, more vulnerable. Elizabeth fought the urge to reach out and touch him. We're in this together, she reminded him, echoing their words from the restaurant. That's what matters. But as they finally made their way inside, Elizabeth couldn't help but wonder if that was still true. If somewhere along the way, this careful arrangement of convenience hadn't started to become something far more dangerous and far more real than either of them had bargained for. The pre-op room at Boston Children's Hospital felt smaller than Elizabeth remembered, despite its state-of-the-art equipment and cheerful wall murals. Lily lay on the bed, her small frame nearly swallowed by the hospital gown, while nurses bustled around checking vital signs and IVs. Mom? Lily's voice trembled slightly. Is it going to hurt? Elizabeth's heart clenched. She perched on the edge of the bed, smoothing her daughter's dark curls. No, sweetie, you'll be sleeping the whole time. Dr. Richards is the best at what she does. But why can't William do my surgery? Lily asked, her eyes darting to the door as if hoping he'd appear. He fixes hearts too. Elizabeth exchanged a glance with the nurse, checking Lily's blood pressure. They'd discussed this. William had insisted he couldn't perform the surgery himself. Too personal, he'd said. Too much risk of emotional involvement affecting his judgment. Remember what we talked about? Elizabeth kept her voice gentle. Sometimes doctors can't operate on people they're close to. But William helped choose Dr. Richards specially for you. He'll be right there in the observation room, watching over everything. As if summoned by their conversation, William appeared in the doorway. He'd foregone his usual suit for surgical scrubs, and something about seeing him this way made Elizabeth's breath catch. How's our patient? He asked, moving to Lily's bedside with the quiet confidence that had become so familiar. Scared, Lily admitted in a small voice. William's expression softened in a way Elizabeth had never seen before. He sat on the bed's other side, taking Lily's small hand in his. Want to know a secret? Every brave person gets scared sometimes. But you know what makes them brave? Lily shook her head. They feel the fear and do what needs to be done anyway. He reached into his scrub pocket and pulled out a slightly worn stuffed rabbit. This is Stanley. He belonged to someone very special to me. She always said he had magic powers, that he could make any scary thing feel less scary. Elizabeth's heart stopped. The rabbit. She'd seen it in the photo at Victoria's house, clutched in Rebecca's small arms. Lily's eyes widened. Really? William nodded solemnly. Really? I thought maybe he could help you be brave today. Would you like that? Lily hugged the rabbit close, and Elizabeth had to blink back tears. The gesture was so unexpected, so deeply personal that it shattered something inside her. Dr. Ashford? A nurse appeared in the doorway. Dr. Richards is ready for the pre-op consultation. William stood, professional mask sliding back into place. I'll be right there. He squeezed Lily's hand once more. Stanley and I will both be watching over you, okay? After he left, Lily clutched the rabbit closer. Mom, I think I'm ready now. Hours later, Elizabeth paced the private waiting room William had arranged, every tick of the clock echoing like thunder. She'd tried reading, tried answering work emails, tried everything to distract herself from the fact that her daughter's heart was currently being operated on 17 floors above her. The door opened and she spun around hoping for news. Instead, she found Victoria. I thought you might need company, William's sister said, setting down 2 cups of what smelled like actually decent coffee. Hospital waiting rooms can be hell. Elizabeth accepted the coffee gratefully, surprised by the gesture. Thank you. I didn't expect to see the Ice Queen showing compassion. Victoria's lips quirked. I'm not always the villain, Elizabeth, especially not when it comes to children in operating rooms. She paused. William told me about giving Lily the rabbit. Elizabeth's hands tightened around her coffee cup. Rebecca's rabbit. Yes. Victoria sat down, indicating Elizabeth should do the same. You know, that rabbit sat on his desk for 5 years. Untouched. He wouldn't even let the housekeepers dust it. She studied Elizabeth carefully. But he gave it to your daughter. Without hesitation. I don't know what that means, Elizabeth whispered. Though part of her did know. The same part that noticed how William's eyes followed her when she moved through rooms. How his touch lingered longer than necessary for their act. I think you do. Victoria's voice was gentler than Elizabeth had ever heard it. I came here ready to wage war against you, to protect my brother from what I thought was a gold digger taking advantage of his vulnerability. She held up a hand when Elizabeth started to protest. But I've been watching. The way he looks at you when you're not looking. The way you instinctively reach for each other. The way he's started living again instead of just existing. Elizabeth felt tears threatening. Victoria, it's complicated. Love usually is. Victoria took a sip of her coffee. Especially when both people are carrying around enough emotional baggage to sink the Titanic. Before Elizabeth could respond, the waiting room door opened again. This time it was William, still in his scrubs, his face unreadable. Elizabeth shot to her feet. Lily? The surgery was successful, he said immediately, and Elizabeth's knees nearly buckled with relief. Dr. Richards is closing now. Everything went exactly as planned. Victoria stood gathering her things. I'll leave you two alone. Elizabeth, think about what I said. After she left, William crossed the room in 3 long strides and pulled Elizabeth into his arms. She melted into him, all the fear and tension of the past hours spilling out in quiet sobs against his chest. She's okay, he murmured into her hair. She's going to be okay. Elizabeth pulled back slightly, looking up at him. Thank you for everything. The rabbit. I wanted her to have it, he said quietly. Rebecca would have wanted that too. Something shifted between them in that moment. Some invisible wall crumbling away. Elizabeth became acutely aware of how close they were standing, of his hands still on her waist, of the way his eyes dropped to her lips. "William," she breathed, not sure if it was a question or a warning. The door opened again, shattering the moment. "Dr. Ashford, Ms. Bennett, Lily's being moved to recovery." They stepped apart, but something had changed. Something fundamental, and frightening and thrilling all at once. As they rode the elevator to the recovery floor, Elizabeth thought about Victoria's words about love and complications, about hearts leading where they shouldn't go, about the way William had given Rebecca's rabbit to Lily without hesitation. The lines between pretense and reality were blurring more each day, and Elizabeth was starting to forget why they'd drawn them in the first place. But with 6 months still left in their contract and Lily's recovery ahead of them, she couldn't afford to forget. She couldn't afford to fall in love with William Ashford. Even if, watching him lean over Lily's recovery bed with such gentle concern, she suspected it might already be too late. 3 days after Lily's surgery, Elizabeth woke with a start in the hospital recliner, her neck stiff from the awkward angle. The first rays of dawn filtered through the blinds, casting stripes of gold across the recovery room. Lily slept peacefully, her chest rising and falling in steady rhythm, Stanley the rabbit tucked securely under one arm. A soft knock drew her attention to the door. William stood there, 2 coffee cups in hand, already impeccably dressed for the day despite the early hour. "Thought you might need this," he said quietly, offering her one of the cups. "My hero," Elizabeth murmured, accepting the coffee gratefully. Their fingers brushed during the exchange, and both of them pretended not to notice the spark that passed between them. They'd been doing a lot of pretending lately, pretending the almost kiss in the waiting room hadn't happened, pretending their touches didn't linger, pretending their hearts didn't race when they caught each other's eyes across rooms. William checked Lily's vitals on the monitor, his professional mask firmly in place. "Her numbers look good. Dr. Richards will probably clear her to come home tomorrow." Home. The word hung between them, loaded with meaning. Over the past weeks, William's townhouse had started feeling like home in a way Elizabeth hadn't expected. The way Lily's books had migrated to various corners, the way Mrs. Chen hummed while preparing their favorite meals, the way William's usually pristine study now contained a small corner desk for Lily's homework. It all felt dangerous, real. "The gala is in 2 days," William said, breaking into her thoughts. "We can postpone our appearance if you'd rather stay with Lily." "No," Elizabeth shook her head. "Mrs. Chen already offered to stay with her, and after everything you've done for us." She met his eyes. "We need to keep up appearances." Something flickered across William's face. "Is that the only reason?" Before Elizabeth could respond, Lily stirred, saving her from having to answer a question she wasn't sure she was ready to face. "William?" Lily's voice was sleepy. "You're here early." He moved to her bedside, his entire demeanor softening. "Just checking on my favorite patient. How are you feeling?" "Better. Stanley helped." She hugged the rabbit closer. "Mom said maybe I can go home soon?" "That's right. And you know what? I heard the cafeteria has chocolate pudding today. If your mom agrees, maybe we could sneak you some with breakfast." Elizabeth watched as her daughter's face lit up, watched as William conspiratorially winked at her, and felt her heart constrict. This wasn't supposed to happen. He wasn't supposed to become so essential to their lives. This was meant to be a business arrangement, not whatever this was becoming. Later that afternoon, Dr. Richards confirmed Lily could return home the next day. As they packed up the room, Elizabeth found herself struggling with a tangled IV pole. "Here, let me." William's voice came from behind her, his chest brushing against her back as he reached around to help. The closeness was overwhelming, his cologne mixing with the antiseptic hospital smell in a way that made her dizzy. "William," she said softly, turning to face him. They were standing too close, the space between them charged with everything, unsaid. "Yes?" His voice was equally quiet, his eyes intense. "What are we doing?" He understood her meaning immediately. "I don't know," he admitted. This isn't... I didn't expect... Dr. Ashford? A nurse appeared in the doorway. The board meeting is starting in 5 minutes. William stepped back, running a hand through his hair. We'll talk later. Elizabeth nodded, not trusting her voice. She watched him leave, her heart pounding with words unspoken. That evening, after Lily had fallen asleep watching cartoons on the hospital TV, Elizabeth found herself wandering to the hospital chapel. She wasn't particularly religious, but she needed somewhere quiet to think. I thought I might find you here, Victoria's voice echoed in the empty space. William used to come here too after he lost them. Elizabeth turned to find William's sister sliding into the pew beside her. I'm not sure what I'm doing anymore, she confessed. Victoria was quiet for a moment. You know, after Catherine and Rebecca died, I thought William died with them. He was there physically, but the brother I knew? He was gone. Until you came. Along. Victoria, let me finish. I see the way you look at each other when you think no one's watching. The way he lights up around Lily. The way you both fight whatever this is becoming. She paused. What are you so afraid of? Elizabeth stared at the flickering candles at the altar. Losing him, she whispered. When this is over, when our arrangement ends, I can't let Lily get hurt again. I can't let myself. Who says it has to end? It's not real, Elizabeth protested weakly. It was never supposed to be real. Victoria stood, smoothing her skirt. Seems pretty real to me. And to William. Maybe it's time you both stopped pretending it isn't. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Lily was cleared for discharge, and William insisted on pushing her wheelchair himself, making her giggle by taking exaggerated turns through the corridors. As they helped Lily settle into the car, their hands brushed again, and this time neither of them pulled away immediately. Elizabeth, William started, his voice low. About what you asked yesterday. There you are. A booming voice interrupted them. They turned to find Dr. Montgomery approaching. William, I've been looking everywhere for you. The board needs to discuss the upcoming cardiac wing expansion. And Elizabeth, dear, we simply must go over the final details for the gala. You two lovebirds will have plenty of time together later. Elizabeth saw the flash of frustration cross William's face before his professional mask slipped back into place. She felt it too, this constant interruption of moments that might lead somewhere real. As they drove home, Lily chattering happily, in the back seat about finally sleeping in her own bed again, Elizabeth caught William watching her in the rearview mirror. Their eyes met, and in that moment she knew Victoria was right. This had stopped being pretense somewhere along the way. The question was, what were they going to do about it? With the gala looming and their arrangement only halfway complete, Elizabeth wondered if they were brave enough to find out, or if, like the couples in her beloved library books, they would let fear keep them from their chance at happiness. Stanley the rabbit watched from Lily's lap, his button eyes somehow knowing, as if he'd seen this story before and was just waiting for the humans to catch up to what their hearts already knew. The Boston Museum of Fine Arts glowed like a jewel against the night sky, its marble facade illuminated for the hospital's annual gala. Elizabeth stood before the mirror in William's guest bathroom, hardly recognizing herself in the midnight blue gown his stylist had chosen. The silk cascaded like water, making her feel more elegant than she'd ever imagined possible. Mom, Lily's voice came through the door. William says you're going to be the prettiest person at the whole party. Elizabeth's heart fluttered. Did he now? Actually, William's deep voice joined Lily's. I believe I said she would outshine everyone else combined. Elizabeth opened the door to find them both waiting, Lily in her pajamas ready for her evening with Mrs. Chin, and William in a perfectly tailored tuxedo that made her mouth go dry. You look... William's voice trailed off as he took her in, his eyes darkening in a way that made her pulse race. Beautiful, Lily finished for him, beaming. Like a princess. Elizabeth laughed, grateful for her daughter's interruption of a moment that felt too intense. Thank you, sweetheart. Now, you'll be good for Mrs. Chen? Of course. Lily hugged her, then turned to William. Make sure you dance with Mom, okay? Mrs. Chen says dancing is romantic. William's lips twitched. Does she now? After final goodbyes and promises to check in, they made their way to the waiting town car. The drive to the museum was charged with unspoken tension, their bodies hyper-aware of each other in the confined space. Victoria helped plan this event, William said finally, breaking the silence. She's been surprisingly supportive lately. Elizabeth thought of their conversation in the chapel. She wants you to be happy. And what about you? His voice was soft. What do you want, Elizabeth? Before she could answer, the car pulled up to the museum's entrance. Camera flashes immediately began popping. The hospital's biggest fundraiser of the year always drew press attention. William helped her from the car, his hand warm against her back as they posed for photos. They'd done this dance before at smaller events, but tonight felt different, more real. Inside, the museum's grand hall had been transformed into a glittering wonderland. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow light across marble floors, while string musicians played from a balcony. Above, hospital board members, wealthy donors, and Boston's elite mingled among the ancient statues and priceless paintings. Dr. Ashford! Dr. Montgomery descended upon them immediately. Elizabeth, darling, you look stunning. William, the board is absolutely thrilled with your work on the new cardiac wing proposals. And your personal life? She beamed at them both. Well, let's just say everyone is delighted to see you so happy. As she swept away to greet other guests, William's hand tightened slightly on Elizabeth's waist. Shall we dance? I did make a promise to Lily, after all. The orchestra was playing something slow and romantic as William led her to the dance floor. His hand settled on her waist, hers on his shoulder, their other hands clasped together. The position felt intimate, necessary. You do look beautiful tonight, he murmured, his lips close to her ear. Though you always do. Elizabeth's heart thundered. William, I've been thinking about what you asked me. About what we're doing. His eyes met hers, intense and vulnerable. I don't want to pretend anymore. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Before Elizabeth could respond, a familiar voice cut through the moment. William? Oh my God. William Ashford? They turned to find a stunning woman in a red dress staring at them, her perfectly manicured hand pressed to her chest in surprise. Christina? William's voice was shocked. What are you doing here? I'm on the hospital board now. She smiled, her eyes never leaving William's face. It's been, what, 6 years? Not since... She trailed off, glancing at Elizabeth. You must be the fiancé everyone's talking about. I'm Christina Porter. I was Catherine's best friend. Elizabeth felt William tense beside her. It's nice to meet you, she managed. I just can't believe it, Christina continued, moving closer. After Catherine, you were so adamant about never... She touched William's arm. We should catch up, for old time's sake. Elizabeth watched as something dark flickered across William's face. She knew that look, had seen it when he spoke of Catherine and Rebecca, when he thought no one was watching. Excuse me, she murmured, suddenly needing air. I should powder my nose. She made her way through the crowd, finding refuge on a quiet balcony overlooking the museum's courtyard. The night air was cool against her heated skin. He loved her, you know. Victoria's voice came from behind her. Catherine. They were high school sweethearts, the perfect couple. Everyone thought they'd grow old together. Elizabeth turned. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to understand. Victoria moved to stand beside her. What happened to them, and it broke something in William. Christina was there through all of it. She and Catherine were inseparable since childhood. After the fire, Christina tried to help William through his grief, but he shut everyone out. Even her. Elizabeth thought of Christina's perfectly manicured hand on William's arm, the history in her eyes. She wanted more than friendship. She thought they could heal each other, Victoria confirmed. But William wasn't ready. Until you. Me? Elizabeth's laugh was bitter. This isn't real, Victoria. It's an arrangement. Is it? Victoria's voice was gentle. Because I just watched my brother tell the board he's stepping back from the Bay chief of cardiology position. He said he wants more time for family. Elizabeth's world tilted. What? He didn't tell you? Victoria smiled sadly. He doesn't need this arrangement anymore, Elizabeth. Hasn't for weeks. The board already approved his leadership role based on his work alone. He's still playing along because he doesn't want to lose you and Lily. Before Elizabeth could process this revelation, William appeared in the balcony doorway. Elizabeth? Are you all right? Victoria squeezed her arm before leaving them alone. The air felt electric with possibility and fear. I'm sorry about Christina, William said, moving closer. She was part of my past. A past you're still healing from, Elizabeth said softly. No. His voice was firm. A past I've finally made peace with. Because of you. Because of Lily. He took her hands in his. What I was trying to say before. This stopped being pretense for me months ago. I love how you take your coffee black but secretly add sugar when you think no one's watching. I love how you sing off-key to Lily at bedtime. I love how you've brought life back into my home, back into me. Elizabeth's heart stopped. William, I love you, he said simply. Both of you. And I don't want this to end in 6 months. I want forever. The world seemed to pause, suspended in this moment of truth. Elizabeth looked into his eyes and saw everything. His fear, his hope, his love. And for the first time, she let herself admit what her heart had known for weeks. I love you too, she whispered. His kiss, when it came, felt like coming home. Like every romance novel she'd ever read had somehow gotten it wrong, because nothing could have prepared her for this, for the way her heart seemed to expand and contract all at once, for the way the world narrowed to just this moment, just them. Inside, the gala continued. Christina Porter watched from a window, understanding finally settling in her eyes. Victoria smiled knowingly into her champagne, and somewhere across town, a little girl clutched a well-loved rabbit and dreamed of happily ever afters. But on that balcony under the stars, Elizabeth and William finally stopped pretending. Sometimes, after all, the greatest love stories begin with a lie and end with the purest truth of all. The morning after the gala, Elizabeth woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains. She was in William's room. Their room now, she supposed. The events of last night rushing back in a flood of memories. Their kiss on the balcony, the quiet drive home filled with tender glances and intertwined fingers, the whispered confessions in the darkness. The bed beside her was empty, but she could hear voices drifting up from the kitchen below. Following the sound, she found William and Lily at the kitchen island, both covered in flour, attempting to make what appeared to be pancakes. You have to flip it faster, Lily was instructing seriously. Or it won't do the cool spin in the air. Ah, I see, William replied with equal seriousness, though his eyes were dancing. Like this? He attempted the flip, and the pancake landed half-folded, on itself. Almost, Lily giggled. Maybe we should let Mom show us when she wakes up. Too late, Elizabeth said from the doorway, unable to keep the smile from her face. I see you two have been busy. They both turned, wearing matching, guilty expressions that made her heart squeeze. William's hair was mussed, a streak of flour, across his cheek, making him look younger, more carefree than she'd ever seen him. We wanted to surprise you with breakfast, Lily explained, running to hug her. William said special days need special breakfasts. Elizabeth's eyes met William's over their daughter's head. Special days? Well, he moved closer, pulling them both into his arms. It's not every day a family becomes real instead of pretend. Lily looked between them, her eyes widening. Does this mean William's really going to be my dad now? Not just pretend? The question hung in the air, weighted with hope and possibility. Elizabeth felt William tense slightly beside her, knowing how much this moment meant. "If that's something you'd want, sweetheart," he said carefully, kneeling to Lily's level. "I love you and your mom very much. Nothing would make me happier than being your dad. For real." Lily launched herself into his arms, nearly knocking him over. "Yes, I've been practicing calling you Dad in my head for weeks." Elizabeth wiped tears from her eyes, watching as William held Lily tight, his own eyes suspiciously bright. This was everything she'd ever wanted for her daughter, everything she'd feared to hope for. The moment was interrupted by the doorbell. Mrs. Chen wasn't due until later, and Victoria usually called first. William went to answer it, still wearing his flower-covered apron. Elizabeth heard his sharp intake of breath before she saw who it was. "Mother?" Eleanor Ashford stood in the doorway, every inch the Boston Society matron in her perfectly tailored suit. Her cool gray eyes took in William's appearance, then shifted to Elizabeth and Lily behind him. "I think it's time we discuss this situation," she said, stepping past William into the foyer. "Victoria told me about last night's display at the gala." Elizabeth instinctively pulled Lily closer. She'd heard about Eleanor Ashford, of course, the family matriarch who'd withdrawn to their Martha's Vineyard estate after losing her granddaughter, who rarely ventured into Boston anymore. "Mother." William's voice had an edge she'd never heard before. "Now isn't the time." "When is the time, William?" Eleanor's voice was sharp. "When you've completely forgotten Catherine? When you've replaced Rebecca?" "Mrs. Ashford." Elizabeth stepped forward, her arm still around Lily. "I understand your concern. Do you?" Eleanor's gaze was arctic. "Do you understand what it's like to lose a child? To watch your son bury his wife and daughter on the same day? To see him finally pulling himself together, only to throw himself into some arranged convenience with a woman he barely knows?" William went very still. "What did you say?" Eleanor's lips curved in a cold smile. "Did you think I wouldn't investigate? A hospital librarian suddenly engaged to one of Boston's most eligible bachelors? It wasn't hard to find the truth. The timing of her daughter's surgery, the sudden engagement. Really, William, I taught you better than to be so obvious." Elizabeth felt the blood drain from her face. Beside her, Lily's small body trembled. "Mommy? What does she mean?" "I think," William's voice was dangerously quiet, "that you should leave, Mother." "William." "Now." He moved to stand between her and his family, and the thought hit Elizabeth suddenly. That's what they were now, his family. "We can discuss this later, in private." After Eleanor left, a heavy silence fell over the kitchen. The pancakes were forgotten, growing cold on the counter. Lily looked between them, confusion and hurt warring in her eyes. "Was it all pretend?" she whispered. "Did you only want to be my dad because of my surgery?" "No." William knelt again, his voice fierce. "Listen to me, Lily. Yes, your mom and I made an arrangement at first. But everything else, every moment we've spent together, every feeling, every promise, that's all real. I love you. I love your mother. That's the truest thing I know." Elizabeth joined them on the floor, pulling them both close. "Sometimes," she said softly, "the best things in life start one way and become something else entirely. Like how the caterpillar thinks it's just going to sleep but wakes up as a butterfly. But Grandmother doesn't want us to be a family." Lily's voice was small. "What Grandmother wants doesn't matter," William said firmly. "What matters is what we want. And I want you and your mom in my life forever." Later, after Lily had been reassured and sent upstairs to play, Elizabeth found William in his study staring out the window. "I'm sorry," he said without turning. "I should have anticipated she'd investigate. Should have protected you both." "Petter." Elizabeth moved to stand beside him, taking his hand. "We knew there would be challenges. This is just the first." He turned to her, his eyes haunted. "She's wrong, you know. About Catherine and Rebecca. I'll always love them, always miss them, but loving you and Lily, it doesn't diminish that. It doesn't replace them. It just means my heart grew bigger. I know. Elizabeth reached up to touch his face, and we'll make sure Eleanor understands that too. Together. William pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. I don't deserve you. Too bad, she smiled against his chest. You're stuck with us now. Above them, they could hear Lily's footsteps, the sound of her talking to Stanley the rabbit about their new family. Outside, Boston continued its Sunday morning rhythm. And in William's study, two people who had started with a business arrangement held each other, knowing that sometimes the greatest love stories don't follow the expected path. Sometimes they start with a lie and grow into a truth more beautiful than either person could have imagined. Thunder rolled across Boston's skyline as Elizabeth hurried through the hospital's parking garage, her arms full of files she'd been organizing in the library. The past week since Eleanor's confrontation had been tense, filled with whispered conversations and worried glances. William had tried meeting with his mother twice, but each attempt had ended in painful stalemate. Her phone buzzed. A text from William. Mother's called an emergency board meeting. Don't worry, I love you. Elizabeth's stomach clenched. She'd known Eleanor wouldn't give up easily, but she hadn't expected her to take things this far. Elizabeth? Victoria's voice echoed through the garage. She hurried over, her usual polished appearance slightly disheveled. Thank God I caught you. You need to come with me. The board meeting? Victoria nodded grimly. Mother's trying to force William out of his position. She's convinced the board his judgment is compromised because of your arrangement. She has documentation, Elizabeth, private investigators' reports, timeline analyses, everything. Elizabeth felt the blood drain from her face. She can't do that. William's brilliant at his job. The Cardiac Wing Project is exactly why we need you there. Victoria grabbed her arm, steering her toward the elevator. William won't defend himself, won't tell them how much he's changed, how much better he is with you and Lily. But you can. The elevator ride to the boardroom felt endless. Elizabeth's mind raced, remembering all the moments that had led them here. That first desperate meeting in the hospital corridor, Lily's surgery, the gala, their first real kiss. How could something that had started as pretense have become so fundamentally real? They could hear Eleanor's voice before they reached the boardroom, clearly demonstrating impaired judgment. The timing of the engagement, the sudden desire to step back from the chief of cardiology position. This is not the William we know. Victoria squeezed Elizabeth's hand before pushing open the door. The boardroom fell silent as they entered. William sat at one end of the long table, his face a mask of careful control. Eleanor stood at the other end, a thick folder open before her. Between them sat the hospital board members, their expressions ranging from concerned to uncomfortable. I'm sorry, Dr. Montgomery spoke first, but this is a closed meeting. No, William stood. She needs to be here. They both do. Eleanor's lips thinned. This is a family matter. Yes, Elizabeth found her voice. It is, because we are William's family now. A family built on lies? Eleanor scoffed, lifting a paper from her folder. Shall I read the timeline I've compiled? How my son met you in a hospital corridor, how your daughter conveniently needed expensive surgery, how this engagement materialized exactly when William needed to prove his stability to the board. Mother, William's voice was dangerous. Enough. No, William, not enough. Eleanor turned to the board. My son is brilliant, one of the finest surgeons of his generation, but since losing Catherine and Rebecca, he's been fragile. This woman took advantage of that fragility, manipulated his grief. How dare you? Elizabeth's quiet words cut through Eleanor's speech like a blade. How dare you reduce what we have to manipulation? Yes, William and I made an arrangement. Yes, it started because of Lily's surgery and his need to prove himself to the board. But do you know what really happened? She moved to stand beside William, drawing strength from his presence. Your son taught my daughter about the human, heart using his old medical school models. He gave her Rebecca's stuffed rabbit when she was scared before surgery. He reads her bedtime stories and helps with her math homework and loves her like she's his own. And me? Elizabeth's voice cracked slightly. He taught me how to trust again, how to believe in second chances. He didn't just save my daughter's life, he saved both of us. Pretty words, Eleanor said coldly. But the fact remains that I love them. William's voice filled the room. Yes, Mother, it started as an arrangement, but it became real, more real than anything I've felt since losing Catherine and Rebecca. He turned to the board members. I'm not stepping back from the chief position because I'm unstable. I'm doing it because for the first time in 5 years, I want more than just surgery. I want a life, a family. William, Eleanor's voice softened slightly. You had a family, a perfect family, and I lost them. William's words were raw with emotion. But loving Elizabeth and Lily doesn't dishonor Catherine and Rebecca's memory. It honors them. Catherine always said love multiplies, it doesn't divide. She would have wanted this for me, to find happiness again, to be a father again. Victoria stepped forward. Mother, look at him. Really look. When was the last time you saw him this alive? This whole? Thunder crashed outside as Eleanor stared at her son, really seeing him perhaps for the first time since the fire. The careful way Elizabeth's hand rested on his shoulder, the quiet strength in his posture, the light in his eyes that had been missing for so long. The board needs to discuss this privately, Dr. Montgomery said gently. William, Elizabeth, Mrs. Ashford, if you could give us the room. They waited in the hallway, the storm raging outside matching the tension within. Eleanor stood apart from them, her rigid posture betraying her inner turmoil. I visit their graves every Sunday, she said suddenly, her voice barely audible. Catherine always loved gardenias. I bring them fresh ones. Tell them about your achievements, William. Lately, I've been telling them about you and Lily. She turned to them, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I thought if you replaced them, it would be like losing them all over again. Grandmother. Lily's voice startled them all. She stood with Mrs. Chen, who had brought her for her checkup. Is that why you don't want us to be a family? Because you miss Rebecca? Eleanor's composure cracked slightly. Yes, darling, I miss her very much. Lily walked over to her, pulling something from her backpack. William gave me Stanley. That was Rebecca's rabbit. He said Rebecca would want someone else to love him now. Maybe. She hesitated, then pressed on bravely. Maybe she'd want someone else to love her dad too. And maybe you could have more people to love. Eleanor stared at the well-loved rabbit in Lily's hands, a sob catching in her throat. Oh, my dear girl, she whispered, kneeling to Lily's level. When did you get so wise? The boardroom door opened, and Dr. Montgomery emerged. We've reached a decision. But looking at Eleanor holding Lily, at William and Elizabeth standing together, at Victoria wiping tears from her eyes, it was clear that the board's decision hardly mattered anymore. The real victory had already been won, not in the boardroom, but in the quiet space between heartbeats where love had transformed pretense into truth. Sometimes, Elizabeth thought, watching her daughter heal not just a grandmother's heart, but an entire family's, the greatest storms bring the most beautiful rainbows. 6 months later, Elizabeth stood in the same hospital corridor where it had all begun. The fluorescent lights still cast harsh shadows, but everything else had changed. She wasn't here in desperation this time, but to meet William for lunch. A tradition they'd started after he'd officially stepped into his new role as head of pediatric cardiac research, a position that gave him more time with their family while still saving lives. Mom, Lily's voice echoed down the hallway as she ran from the hospital library, her backpack bouncing. I got an A+ on my science project. Mrs. Rodriguez said my heart diagram was the best in class. That's wonderful, sweetheart. Elizabeth hugged her daughter, marveling at how healthy she looked, how her cheeks glowed with life. Did you thank William for helping you with the research? Actually, William appeared behind them, still in his surgical scrubs. She didn't need much help. Our girl's becoming quite the cardiac expert. Our girl. The word still made Elizabeth's heart skip, even after all these months. She reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. Don't forget, Lily bounced on her toes. Grandmother's coming for dinner tonight. She promised to bring more pictures of Rebecca to show me. The transformation in Eleanor had been gradual, but profound. It started the day of the board meeting when Lily's innocent wisdom had cracked open her defensive shell. Weekly dinners had become monthly visits to Martha's Vineyard, where Eleanor slowly shared stories of Catherine and Rebecca, helping both herself and William heal by keeping their memories alive while embracing new joy. Speaking of dinner, William squeezed Elizabeth's hand. We should head home, I have something special planned. The town car waited outside, a luxury Elizabeth had finally stopped feeling guilty about accepting. As they drove through Boston's evening traffic, Lily chatted about her upcoming school play, Stanley the rabbit secured firmly in her lap. But something felt different about tonight. William seemed almost nervous, his thumb rubbing circles on Elizabeth's palm in that way he did when his mind was working overtime. When they arrived home, Mrs. Chen met them with a knowing smile. Miss Lily, would you help me in the kitchen? We're making your father's favorite dessert. Father. The word no longer needed qualifiers or explanations. It simply was. Elizabeth. William led her to the back garden, which had been transformed. Hundreds of tiny lights twinkled in the early evening darkness, and in the center stood the small wrought iron table where they'd shared their first real conversation about their pasts. William? Elizabeth's heart began to race. He guided her to the table, where a familiar piece of paper lay. She recognized it immediately, their original contract now worn and creased. 1 year, he said softly, picking up the paper. That's what we agreed to, a business arrangement, a pretense. He tore the contract in half, then quarters, letting the pieces flutter to the ground. But what we built was real, more real than anything I could have imagined that night in the hospital corridor. Elizabeth felt tears gathering as he knelt before her, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. I know we're already technically engaged, he smiled, but I want to do this right. No contracts, no arrangements, no pretense. Just us, and love and truth. He opened the box, revealing a vintage ring with a stunning sapphire center stone. This was my grandmother's ring. Not the society grandmother everyone knew, but my father's mother. She was a librarian too, actually. She always said books and love were the only things worth building a life around. Elizabeth's laugh came out half-sob as he continued. Elizabeth Bennet, you and Lily brought light back into my world when I thought I'd live in darkness forever. You taught me that love doesn't divide or replace, it multiplies. You showed me that second chances aren't about forgetting the past, but about being brave enough to embrace the future. His voice cracked slightly. Will you marry me? For real this time? Yes, she whispered, then louder, yes. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, cheers erupted from the house. Lily came running out, followed by Victoria, Eleanor, Mrs. Chen, and even Christina, who had become a surprising ally and friend over the months. Finally, Lily threw her arms around them both. I've been helping William plan this for weeks. Eleanor stepped forward, her eyes bright with happy tears. Catherine would be so proud, she said softly to William, of all of this, of who you've become. She turned to Elizabeth. And you, my dear, thank you for helping us all remember how to live again. Later that night, after celebrations and toasts, after Lily had fallen asleep clutching Stanley and dreaming of wedding flowers, Elizabeth and William stood in their garden again. A penny for your thoughts, he murmured, holding her close. Elizabeth looked up at the stars, thinking of all the twists and turns that had led them here. I was just thinking about fate, about how sometimes the most beautiful things grow from desperate moments, about how love stories don't always start with love at first sight. Sometimes they start with a business proposition in a hospital corridor. His eyes twinkled. Sometimes, she agreed, reaching up to touch his face. but they become something else entirely. William leaned down to kiss her, and Elizabeth melted into him, knowing that while their story hadn't started like a fairy tale, it had become something better, something real and true and perfectly imperfect. Up in her room, Lily slept peacefully, her heart beating strong and steady. Stanley watched over her from his place of honor on her pillow, his button eyes somehow knowing, as if he'd always known this was how things would end. Not with a contract's expiration, but with a family's beginning. And in the garden, under the same stars that had witnessed their first kiss at the gala, William and Elizabeth held each other, no longer pretending, no longer afraid, simply being what they had become, two hearts that had found their way home. Sometimes, after all, the greatest love stories aren't about the beginning or the end, but about all the moments in between, the quiet breakfasts, the bedtime stories, the hospital corridors and garden conversations that transform strangers into family and arrangements into love. Their story hadn't ended. In many ways, it was just beginning. But now they would write each new chapter together. No contracts needed, just love multiplying with each passing day. If you had to make a deal for love, how far would you go to protect someone you love? William and Elizabeth started with a lie that turned into the truest love. And do you believe that sometimes we need to lose ourselves in order to find ourselves? Leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.